Hey everyone, Dave Floss here with Prometheus Folding Toys, and today we're going to take a look at the LaserPecker LP2, LP4, and the LX1. So stick around. All right, there's going to be a lot to unpack here, but today we're going to be looking at various LaserPecker laser engraving products, including the new LP4 and the LX1. And we're going to kind of do a quick side-by-side comparison with the LP2, one of their pretty popular models that came out a couple years ago. Now, laser engraving is not new, but the ability to do laser engraving at home and do pretty good, um, really good products in a variety of different materials is relatively new, especially at an affordable price point, really for the hobbyist. I mean, there's been laser engraving for some time, but usually required a significant investment as well as a skill level to use that equipment. And now with LaserPecker, Creality, and some of the others, we're getting these really wonderful devices that we can bring home and use in our shops for a variety of different things. So for us, we actually use a few different machines. We do have a Creality machine that we've been using for a while. But we were really intrigued by the LaserPecker devices because they had a lot of neat features. The ability to do round objects, different types of lasers, whether it's a 10-watt laser, a 20-watt laser, red laser, lots of different lasers. So what have we been using it for? Well, there's a lot of different things. I'm not going to do an exhaustive list, but some of the things that we've used it for, well, you can use it for wood cutting. So you can actually take items and you can actually cut them out, right? So this ornament would be an example, just a thin piece of wood that we cut out and then painted. Um, with the lasers, if you have anodized aluminum or steel that's colored, right, you can then use the laser to pull off the coloring, leaving a design behind, right? And again, depending on uh, the images that you're using, the quality of the laser, you can get some really pretty fine details out of these lasers, including the LP series and the LX1. But there's a lot of other things that you can potentially use it for. For example, we make reproduction capes for action figures, and we had a cricket or a cry-cut, depending on how you pronounce it, right? Fabric cutter, little razor cutter. And while it worked well for some things, it really was challenged with certain fabrics, and we ended up usually having either bad quality, right? We couldn't use it, or just total failure. And one of the good examples of that, that I can kind of show here is here's a cape that we did, right? And I'm going to kind of call out the around the edges here. It got frayed, it got caught. It doesn't do for cutouts. So we had this wild idea one day and said, well, why don't we use the laser? Why don't we put that same template into the laser and see how those settings work? And you can see right away, cut cuts out the armholes perfectly, right? Do a quick side by side here. And fast. I mean, to cut out one of these capes takes 30 seconds. And so it saves us a lot of time and effort. And, one of the other nice things about it too is being a laser, right? Depending on the fabric, you got to dial in your settings for sure. You don't want to burn the fabric, but it does kind of create that seared, I'm going to call it almost like a cauterized edge. So when you take it apart or when you're using it, it doesn't fray nearly as easily. So I think you get some added durability out it. But there's a lot of different devices out there at a lot of different price points, from a few hundred to several $1,000s, and that's really even just within the Laser Pecker series itself, from the LP2, even the LP1 on upward. So what I want to do today is kind of talk about, depending on what you're trying to do, which device might be right for you. Now let me get something out of the way right now. I will be talking about using the software that comes with the device. There's other software out there, some excellent software. LightBurn, the most common one, use it for a lot of different projects. I use it for things, but uh, I really wanted to focus today on out of the box. You get the device, you get the software downloaded from LaserPecker. So we're really going to be talking about kind of the entry into some of these things. We're not going to be talking very specific. We're not going to be talking at all about Light Pro because there's a lot of additional setting and configuration that goes with using that. And I will talk about some of the settings I use, but we're not, I'm not going to go again through an exhaustive list of every setting for every laser for every type of material. Some of that other information that you can find online. But that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to show you is that we just have, for the moment, the LP2 and the LP4. The one nearest us is the LP2. Right now it has its safety cover off, just so you can kind of get a sense for the size. We've got the device itself. We've got the piece of wood here, ornament that's going on there. We just followed the standard directions to plug it in. For all the different pieces. So of course we highly recommend. We're not going to go through each and every individual step. Read the owner's manual for the initial setup and configuration. This one is not particularly difficult. Now the software that we're using is the Laser Pecker Design Space. So let's go ahead and switch over to that. All right, so I'm just going to focus here on the design space. Let me just clear this out for you so we don't see anything. Okay. So the first thing is when you launch the Design Space software, it's fairly straightforward and rudimentary. Now, granted, there might be a bit of a learning curve if you've never used software like this before, but let's go ahead and just cover some of the basics. The first thing is that everything we're doing today is going to be through USB. I'm using a computer. There is an app that you can use for some of their Bluetooth-enabled devices. I am not doing that today. I don't like the app. I want real detailed control over my design. So let's start with we plug the device via USB into our computer. And the first thing we have to do is if over here in the top right corner, you're going to see that it has found my device. Now, if it hadn't found your device or it says no device listed, you want to just click this gear icon, right? And you would be given an opportunity to add that device. So let's go ahead and let's actually power the device off. And once the device is powered up and you go into the Design Space software, you're just going to click Connect Device. The software is not very intuitive. In this case, it's telling you it found something on COM5. I wish it was a little bit more intuitive to say what it actually found right away so you know you're picking the right one. But in this case, we want to use USB. It found something, and if we click on that, we hear the device beep, and you can see that it has now brought in our LP2 unit. The same process is going to be followed for the LP4, the LX1. It really is pretty much the exact same process. Now, basic settings, if you go back to that gear icon, you got your basic information for the device information, the firmware. You can also go to mode settings, and you can see that it has a few different things here, like the adding an accessory, which we do not have on here. Does it make a tone when it's working? I highly recommend you leave that on so you know when it's working, and a few other options that you can look into here. But the basic settings that it comes default are what we're going to use, so we're going to go ahead and close that. Now, the next key is what do you want to engrave? Now, remember the LP2 can only do certain materials. It can't do stainless steel. It can't do things that require a red laser, but things like wood burning, anodized aluminum, certain plastics, although I don't really recommend plastic, especially if you're indoors because of fumes. So today we're going to do a wood ornament. So let's take a quick look here. Let's go back. So we're going to do a wood ornament. So what I have here is just a bunch of these plain wood ornaments. Okay. So the first thing, right, is as you're thinking about what you want to do is to collect the materials that you need. So the first one being, of course, what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be doing a dog tag, another piece of material? Are you going to be doing wood or some type of wood project? The next thing is realize that with the LP2, your design space is fairly limited. It's a few inches by a few inches, so you're not going to be doing really large projects with this particular device. But if you're really just looking for smaller type things, then this could be a great device for you. The other thing that you should have, if you don't have it, is a caliper. You can use a measuring tape, but a caliper is definitely going to help give you, because you really want precise measurements. I'm going to show you why in a moment. Ultimately, so you get the best possible results each time you use the device. So let's start with, we're going to use our ornament here, and we're going to go ahead and measure that edge to edge, right? The diameter basically of the device. And this is coming up at 74 millimeters. 74 millimeters. Why is that important? Well, because that's the space we have. If we go beyond that space, it's going to be lasering off the edge. And onto our build plate, which we don't necessarily want, especially if we wanted to do, if you were doing even a smaller design within it, you want to know the exact circumference and diameter of your device. So how do we do that then? Well, the easiest way to do it is right here within the software. It helps if I'm showing it. Right here within the software, you can see that it has already laid out our max design space. That's those red arrows. This being basically the center of your build plate, dead center. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our little options, and we're going to add an ellipse. Okay? We're just going to draw it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. The reason being is I don't care how big the initial ellipse is. I want to change the size up here to match the measurement of my project. So in this case, I'm going to unclick this lock here, because what that's going to do, if you left that and you change one, it's going to automatically change the other one. And granted, it's pretty close, but I want to make sure that it's exactly 74 by 74. So now I have my circle. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to center my circle. I want it so that it's pretty much centered. You can see it brings up a nice red line here when it's centered that way. And almost, there we go. And you see the red crosshairs? I am now perfectly centered within my space. So now, real easy way to check. Real easy. Let's go ahead and look at our device. So as we're looking at the device now, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to leave the safety cover off just for a moment, just for the purposes of this demonstration. But what we're going to do is let's go back to the software. Let's take a look at all of them now. So within the software, what we want to do is, with just our circle showing, we would have the safety shield on. And the reason this is important is that you have to raise and lower based on the height of the shield. So what I'll do is I'm going to put the shield on. And then there's a tab right here for raising and lowering. I'm going to go ahead and hold that down, and it should lower. Basically the point where it's touching. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important for a couple reasons. The first reason being is that the safety shield keeps the powerful light from reflecting out and injuring your eyes. The second, it creates a little air gap, and there's a fan in the back, and that's going to help with fume distribution. So the first thing we can do, once we have everything in place, now granted, I know I left the ornament in there, that's okay. All we're doing is this preview down in the bottom right-hand corner. Go ahead and hit preview. And what we should see, we're going to go ahead and increase the laser intensity. This is just the preview laser. This is going to burn anything. We're going to bump that up. And it's kind of hard to see, but what it's basically doing, let me see if I can get a little bit closer in here, is that it is drawing a square, an outline of my project, right? So now I know that, and you can see that because I still had the ornament sitting there, it's basically showing me that edge to edge, it is perfectly fitted to my ornament size. So that's great. All right, so we're going to stop our preview. Let's go back full screen here for a minute. So we stopped our preview. So now we know that this is basically our template. This is telling us exactly where the edges or boundaries are of any image that we would put in here. So now let's go ahead and add an image. Now there's obviously a lot of different images, and there's a few different ways you can add them. But over here again, same place we did our circle, you can click on image, and it brings up, in my case, a default folder, but you just search for the folder where the image that you're looking for is. Now I've already imported two images because I think they do a great job of kind of demonstrating two really unique and different ways of doing an ornament, or doing a wood burn, I should say. So the first one I'm going to bring up is a simple black and white, sometimes called vector art. The reason I say this is a good example is because there's really almost nothing you need to adjust. So if I click on the image, let's go ahead and hide my circle, click on the image, we do get some options. But ultimately, if you're looking at a simple black and white type of design, you can go ahead and generally just proceed. Now, we want to make sure it's centered within our template. And the one thing, and I forget this too, but the one thing to not forget is turn off your template. Take it away before you do any burning, because if you don't, it's going to draw that line. We're going to go ahead and hit preview again, because once again, we can make sure that now with just our image, and let's go ahead and take a look at the machines. With just that image, we want to make sure it is centered right around that object, which it is. All right, so now let's take a look at everything. Let's look at it all. We've got our object. We've previewed it. We have a pretty good sense that it's in the right position. We've put our product, in this case, the wood ornament there. So let's go ahead and quit that preview. So now we're ready to do it. We're ready to do a burn. We're ready to do an engraving. So now the next question is, how do we engrave it? Okay. So there's different settings here, and you can do it a couple different ways. But ultimately, you want to make sure you're highlighting your image. Nothing else is visible, right? We don't want to see any other images, any other circles, just what we want to see on the final product, okay? And then we're going to go over to, we're going to click that item that we want to engrave. And you can see we get some options down here. And this is where, depending on who you ask, you can get a million different options, a million different answers. But I'm going to walk you through the basics. The first one is pick your material. In this case, we're using wood. So there we go. We're using wood. The next is the resolution. And you can see that the LP2 goes from 1,000 lines of resolution up to 2,000 lines. For vector art like this, no need to go above 1,000. You're not going to get any significant difference bumping up that resolution. And it will take significantly more time. So we're going to leave it at 1,000. The number of passes is literally how many times is it going to burn over the same area. Is it going to burn one time all the way down? Is it going to do it multiple times? For wood material like this, one pass should be sufficient. Now here is where, even though we chose wood and we got some defaults, these settings are going to cut right through that wood. That's a very thin piece of wood. So this is where it's always a good idea to experiment a little, starting with lower settings. And I'm going to tell you, when I say lower, you can see it defaulted to full power at a depth of 30. Depth of 30. I'm going to set this down to 30% power, just a third of the power, and I'm going to go at depth of 3. I'm going to basically third or 1/3 the power and 10% of the depth, give or take. The reason being is that if this goes through, and all I'm trying to do is shave off that top layer. I'm actually, in this case, using the piece of wood that I'm using has paint on it. So really, I'm just wanting to remove that layer of paint. I don't need to overly scorch through it. So we're going to start with the low setting. And the other reason I'm not worried about this is if it's too low and I look at the item without touching or moving it, I can always just do a second pass to get a little bit deeper each time. So don't jump to full power, lots of depth. You will slice right through it, especially if it's a thinner material. And ultimately, we don't want to burn or start a fire as well by really overdoing it. So we have our image, we have our power settings. We've already previewed, so we're fairly confident that it's lined up properly. It is time to laser engrave, so let's go ahead and hit laser engraving down in the bottom right. You can see here that it's giving us different values for different things, but the only thing that we are using is image. We're not doing fill, we're not doing line. We're only doing a single image, and our image settings are those power of 30 on a depth of 3. We're going to go ahead and hit confirm. It's going to transfer the image to the device and then start engraving. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at that machine a little closer up. And it's going to go line by line all the way from the top to the bottom. This can take a while. With the LP2, it is not a particularly fast machine, so it's just going. Now, the one thing we can do right now is we can go ahead and take a look, even looking through the orange safety shield, and we can kind of get a sense, is it actually cutting into the material? What I can tell you just by looking at it, not particularly. It's not going very deep. I'm not seeing a lot of mark on here. Ultimately, power's not enough. So, don't need to waste time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the engraver from going. Okay? And again, this is where you're going to want to dial it in. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and show you when you have an image that is not just vector art. It's not just a piece like clip art. So let's go ahead and switch our images. And I'm going to show you what this image is supposed to look like. It's this picture right here. Now, oh, well, you know what? Again, it doesn't help if I don't show you. So I have a picture of my cat. Okay. And when I bring it in, the default is going to be to take a picture, a photograph, black and white or color, and turn it into just black and white, straight up. So we lose all of the details. We can barely see the eye, the ears, anything. So this is where we want to adjust this picture for a better output from the engraver. So we're going to go ahead and select the image, and we can see up here we have a few different options for it. I'm not going to go through all of these, but ultimately the one we want is dither. This means it's more of a gray tone. Just by clicking it, boom, you can see it significantly improved and brought back that picture. Now you can play with the contrast here. The thing to keep in mind is that if your image is really dark, like dark on dark on dark, you're going to lose a lot of detail in the burning process. So it might seem counterintuitive, but I like to go just a little bit brighter, a little higher contrast. Just play with the brightness up and down. But again, I don't want all of this gray, dark, gray, dark, gray. It's just going to bleed, and you're not going to get particularly strong results. That is clearly too much. Then we're going to lose all the results. We're going to have almost no detail. But so you can see it seems a little bright, which is totally normal. Um, but now we have an image that we can also burn. Now, in this case, if I did this on the painted wood, um, it's probably not going to come out as well. And the reason being is that if there's any areas where the laser doesn't hit, it's going to leave that red. It's going to leave the material. As opposed to what I'm trying to do in this case, which would be just a straight wood burn. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and raise the device up. Don't have to let it go all the way, just enough for me to fit my fingers in there. Now, one of the things I'll do, quick tip, is that one of the ways I save myself a lot of time is I put some carpenter tape on the bed for the common things that I use. And that way, when I'm ready to do my next piece, in this case, the blank piece of wood, I already have my lineup. Get it centered. And I can lower that back down. Now, I'm still going to quickly hit preview because I want to make sure that my alignment is good, even with the carpenter's tape. So I'll take a quick look over here, and we are really good. Excellent. All right, we're going to go ahead and quit our preview, and let's go back to our software. All right, so we have our image. If we pull up our template, we can see it is just beyond the edge of our template. This would be great if you want to go just barely beyond the edge so that you don't have any edge left over. You want to basically have the image go all the way to the very edge of the project that you're doing. Um, Now we're going to go ahead and get rid of our template so that we're only doing our image. Again, we're going to laser engrave. Now here we're still doing power 30, depth of 3. We're going to cancel that. I don't think that's going to be strong enough. Click on our image. Again, remember if you want to change the settings, click on the image. Now if you have multiple images, multiple things, remember the image is an image. If you change the image for one, for example, if I go here, trying not to click all of them at the same time. Oh, they're hidden. I apologize. That's not going to work. But if I make a change for image, for in this case, let's go power of 75, depth of 10, and I go over to image 1, you can see that that same setting carried over. It's going to treat all images the same. So just bear that in mind. It doesn't differentiate between settings for different images. That's something that if you really want to get that granular, LightBurn software would be an option for you. Now, again, resolution, we could bump it up to 2K. This is not a super high resolution, but since it is a photograph, I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 2K. So we have our wood, 2000 resolution. We're still going to do just a single pass. Power at 75% with a depth of 10. I've already previewed it. I'm going to hit laser engrave. I'm verifying my numbers and hitting confirm. So again, we're going to bring the image over. Now here before, that image took about, I'm going to say 30 to 45 seconds. And I will tell you now, this image, pulling it up, because it's not only a higher quality image, a lot more data basically, but we're also uploading it at 2,000 lines. It's going to take a few, probably a couple minutes here. This is a perfect opportunity for us to fast forward. All right, now we're going to talk about the LP4, the LaserPecker 4. What makes this unit different and really stand out from the LP2? Besides the price, because it's not cheap. Uh, well, ultimately, their LaserPecker packed a lot into this device. Really, I think it's probably the most versatile device that they've come out with. It's got a lot of different accessories. It scales to different sizes. It works with almost any material because this is the first product that I've seen, at least in this size and price range, that is a dual laser system. It has both um, the 10-watt blue laser, but it also has a I'm forgetting the wattage, but I'm going to say 10, maybe it's less. I think it's only 5-watt red laser, but that's a big difference because that red laser is the one that allows you to work with a much larger gambit of materials like glass, clear plastics, shiny aluminum, stainless steel, etc. And because it's a dual laser system, you could have a project with both of those materials and actually work on both of them. Now, you have to kind of differentiate. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's just take a quick look at the product. So let's go ahead and switch over. Let me kind of adjust my camera here. There we go. So right here we have kind of the profile view of the device. You can see right away if I kind of hold it up against the LaserPecker 2, it is a fairly bigger device. It still has a powered lift. In this case, the buttons being on the top, not on the side. Get that out of the way. It has the protective dome. The difference here is the dome on the LP2 is a snap-on. This one is a magnet, which is nice and convenient. It's got a much larger display area. And then if I bring the camera up and over here, it also has a touchscreen built on the device, which gives you some quick readouts. You can put it to sleep. You can do preview mode. You can even switch between the two different laser settings right here on the device. So a little bit convenient for that. A couple other call outs. I'm going to take the shield off here for just a second. It's got a nice work area, and it actually has a removable steel grid, and that grid also allows you to attach these little spacers. So I was talking about earlier using tape, and some people use little wood dowel. It's nice that they included this kind of functional workspace, so that if you have a repetitive project, you can use these to quickly swap out. In this case, I use this for for doing dog tags. I have it all lined up. I have my template made, and I can just put one in, take it out. Put another one in, take it out. Very, very simple. Let's back up just a little bit there. Accessories, accessories, accessories. It's got a lot of different accessories. And again, you don't need all of the accessories. It depends what you want to do, but they have a rotary turnstile here. This is a motorized for rotating circular objects, tumblers, glassware. It's got different teeth, and you can lock that in there and use that with the unit. This would be the other half of that, which is the other end goes on these rollers to keep it nice and smooth. It's got spacers that you can use, so if you need to increase the height of the unit, this is commonly used with the rotation device that I just showed you. There is another piece not shown here, but basically allows you to put an extension on so that you get a lot more range of motion from the device as opposed to kind of just the fixed build plate. So it's definitely got some versatility when it comes to those items. Now, from a software perspective, let's go ahead and switch back to taking a look. So we have our old project. We're going to go ahead and Once again, we need to connect the device. So I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. It's going to say the same COM5, but in this case, the USB cable is going to the LP4, not the LP2. And you can see that it found our LP4 device. You can also see that it completely changed the settings for the build area. And what we have here is the total plate area, and this is the existing burn area. This is basically when the dome is down, this would be your project area here within these blue perimeter lines. We're going to go ahead, we'll take a look at settings up there in the top right. Again, very similar. You can see that it has several different modes. We can put on that rotary extension. If you had an electric roller, you could align that and set that up. There's the slide extension I was talking about. So definitely, again, pretty versatile. And again, one thing you'll notice down here in our settings is that not only do we have the material and resolution, but you can see we can switch between two different laser types. The 450 nanometer, which is our blue laser, kind of the same, again, 10 watt versus the 5 watt LP2. And then this 1064 nanometer red laser for working on different materials, as well as our power and depth. And this is probably a very good place to point out that power is a percentage, and you have to bear that in mind that a power for the 100% of a 5 watt laser is still only half of 100% for a 10 watt laser. So do not assume that the LP2 settings for power and depth, etc., will apply to the LP4. You're dealing with a stronger laser. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our build area. I'm going to go ahead and open. I've already created a template here. So here's what I want to show you. Just like before, just like earlier in our video, I created a template based on the measurements using my caliper for the dog tags that I'm doing. And I've created a bit of a safe zone. So let's go ahead and take a look at that preview. So we're going to go down just like we did before. All the settings, really, all the places to go are the same as what I described earlier. So if we go down and hit preview in the bottom right, and we take a look at our machine, we can see that it's drawing this nice blue line. Let's see if we can get a good angle on that. And I've already lined it up with my item. Now here's one thing, and it's going to be hard to see, but if you can see right over here, there are two red dots, and those are alignment dots. Those are fantastic, because what that's telling me is that when there's two, this is not aligned. That means that right now the unit needs to be lowered to align those two dots. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use the buttons on the top. We should be able to watch those two red dots get closer, 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 and lo and behold, they touch, and no shock. It's when the unit is just in its standard setting. It's basically like the LP2. It's just going to drop pretty much all the way to the bottom. The reason that alignment is important, especially, is first of all, and it's really going to be hard to see through here, but one, I now can see my template is exactly where I want it to be, size-wise. If I had, when it was raised up, it would have been wider, it would have been blown out a bit. But secondly, if you're not using this on the build plate, you're using it with an expansion, an extension, you're using it with the rotator, that alignment is perfect because it means you don't have to rely solely on the dimensions from the cone. So that's really can be very helpful. And I think that was a really great feature that they included. So I'm going to raise this up so I can put my material in there. And in this case, I'm going to grab just a dog tag. Now this one is anodized. It's purple. We've got coloring on it. I'm going to slide that in. And what I've done, and I'm going to take just a quick step back because one of the things is this template that I've created. If we can it's going to be hard to see. Let me take the build plate off for a second. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. Okay, so you're going to get a lot of light reflected on there. But that light, if you can kind of see at the top here, is not going all the way to the top of my material. My material is actually a little bit higher. The reason I did that is my item has a hole in it. And I don't want to laser through the hole. I want my image to be more centered. So basically, my template is going to be able to tell me that When it burns, it's going to burn all the way to the bottom edge, but it's not going to go above the hole in the top. Since that's what I want for this project, that's perfect. Let's bring in an image. I guess it would help if we actually put something in there. So in this case, I've already preloaded image. This is exact same process. Go over to import a photo. In this case, because we're doing anodized, I don't want to do a picture. I just want to do something that's more of a clip art. So I'm going to go ahead and unhide the one that I've already brought in. And it's this nice Bill and Ted. Let's go ahead and zoom in for you there. Maybe that'll make it a little bit easier to see. Zoom, 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 zoom. So we can see our Bill and Ted outline. They're right within the edge. We know that I could adjust this a little bit because I know that even if they're at the top, the hole is here. My template starts just below the hole in the dog tag. So I can actually make this a little bit wider, stay within the edges, and I'm not too close to the bottom. So I've got a nice centered image. Maybe move it down just so it's centered just a little bit more. And we're going to pull this side in just a tiny bit. All right, we got our nice image. Again, I forget to remind myself sometimes, get rid of that rectangle or it's going to burn a line right into your product. Now we can hit preview again, and let's take a look at let's take a look here. And we can see once again, it's putting that nice laser line right in the center of it's perfect. It's perfectly aligned. So we have to pick our material. And the nice thing is once we've chosen the LP4, it kind of helps us understand which laser it will use for different material. But honestly, I never follow this. It's a guide, but I wouldn't take it as gospel. I'm going to go ahead and pick aluminum oxide. We can see that it defaulted back to the 450 nanometer blue laser, which is what we want for this type of material. And then we're going to, quick look, full power, depth of 10, probably overkill. I'm going to dial that down to 5. Single pass should do it. Again, this is more of just a clip art, and it's just removing the material anywhere where we see the black. So if we go ahead and click on laser engrave, make sure that none of our other stuff is showing. Laser engraving. Here we see. Oh, I skipped something. Let me go back real quick. Click on that image again. We also have resolution like we had with the LP2, and you'll see here we have bigger options. The LP2 maxed out at 2K. With the LP4, we can get up to 8K resolution. Again, I'm going to leave it at 1K. Total, anything else would be just overkill at this point. It's a small object. It doesn't have super fine details. We'll get a sense for how it works with even the smaller text here that we have, like the lettering. So let's go ahead and leave that at 1K. Hit laser engrave and hit confirm. The image only takes a few seconds. Let me switch it over to the machine. The machine kicks off. Let's get in there. I just want you to get a sense of the speed. Boom, 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 boom. And 30 seconds later, we are done. All right, let's go ahead and lift that up. Tilt that camera a little bit. Let's go ahead and lift that up. So we can go ahead and let me switch over to me. All right, let's take a look right there. There is your product, which we're having a little bit more challenge, mostly because of the focus of my camera. But you can see that within just a few seconds, it etched right into the material. Let me see if my other camera maybe does a little bit better, getting some focus in there. There you go. Just trying. So we got our details, and if we look closely, the lettering came out. I can see the lettering for that came in there. And again, 30 seconds. So the couple call outs for the LP4. First of all, pretty fast. This wasn't necessarily a very large project. I've done larger projects. I mean, I've done projects that can take a few hours to do everything, but those are much larger projects. So now I want to talk about, well, actually, you know what I can show you is the exact same item, except in this example, I used the red laser because I did it on a piece of silver, and you can see, look how nicely that came out. Etched it right into the stainless steel or the aluminum, and it worked just like a charm. All right, so we're back. I'm going to bring up my original template because I know that these two edges correspond with the spacer that I've done. So I'm going to use that to my advantage and go ahead and go into bring in an ellipse, just like we did. I must have not clicked it. Ellipse. There we go. Again, I'm going to unlock the ratio so I can set it exactly to 74 by 74. I should be able to draw it. And what I want to do is line up my top and other edge so that when I place the item in there right in the corner, this should be a nice template here. So I can now get rid of my square template, and I now have a round template. So let's go ahead and take a look at the machine. So again, I'm just going to grab a piece of, in this case, we'll go ahead and use this piece of colored wood. And the only downside I see right now is that because there is a top to this piece of wood, it's catching on the spacer here. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just put it sideways, because really this is just for a test. If I was actually doing it, I wanted, well, what I can do actually, we're going to lower that down. Okay. We're going to do a quick preview. So I'm just clicking preview like I did before. Let's take a look at everything. So we're going to click preview. And let's go ahead and look at our machine again. And if I look here, well, it looks like we're just a little bit off. It didn't quite line up the way that I expected it to. And I know why it's not lining up, because I had put some space for the dog tag, right? Because I didn't want it to cut the top. So right now we're technically cutting off the top of our material. So let's go ahead and quit that preview. Let's go over here and let's just move that up. Move the whole thing up to about there. Again, I'm just going to hit preview. Take another look. Almost there. Almost perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and quit that preview again. And I'm just moving it up. Preview one more time. And now I am edge to edge all four corners, or four edges of the circle. So let's go ahead and leave that camera just sitting right there. So now I can quit that preview, and let me bring up my monitor. So we have now our template, and we've lined it up so we know that this circle is our basically our work area. And now let's pull in another image. Let's go ahead and grab an image. I want to grab one that's got some photo realism to it. Let's see. Let's go ahead and use, well, let's do the cat one again. I think it would be a nice comparison. So let's bring in the cat. You can see again it defaulted to that black and white. We're going to quickly scale this. I'm not going to go all the way to the outer edge because I got that spacer and I don't want the laser hitting the spacer. So just in the interest of time. Now again, technically my ornament is sideways, so I could rotate this. But really, I just want to demonstrate the ability. So let's go ahead. First thing, let's set this to dither, like we did before. I'm going to bump up that contrast a little bit to get a little bit more distinguishing between the lighter areas and the darker areas. Try down one, up one. Yeah, I think that's good. Right here at the top, if you can see it here, there is the ability to rotate the whole image. So I could just rotate it if I wanted to. That way it would be lined up with the top of my ornament. One thing that I've learned, so this is just something that's experienced to me, is sometimes I'll move the image and it'll print the original way for whatever reason. And I found a workaround, at least it works for me, that if I right click, click the image, so we get the bounding box, right click and choose rasterize. It makes almost no change to the image itself, but for whatever reason, it always makes the alignment turn out better. So let's go ahead and remove our template, our circle. We now have just our image. We can preview it again. We can see when we look over at the machine that it's right within the boundaries. And because I made it a little bit smaller than the template, we're hitting some of the edges. And now let's go ahead and go to next step. And actually, I want to cancel that because I do want to click on my image and I want to change my settings. Again, we're going to use the blue laser because that's appropriate. Now, for the aluminum, we were at 100% power with a depth of 10. That is, again, probably overkill. I think we can probably go 50% power on this 10-watt laser, leave the depth at 10. And in this case, I could go up to 8K. I could get really solid resolution, but ultimately, my concern is that we're going to be here for a very, 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 very long time. So we're going to try to 4K, and let's take a look at how that works. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. We can see that our power is 50 with a depth of 10. I'm going to click confirm. And before we switch over, it's going to take our image. Now it's doing it at 4K this time. Now here's something to note though. The machine itself is faster. So the 2K image, the same image in 2K on the LP2, took its time, really took its time chewing, and then would have been at least a good 45 minutes to an hour to finish. It's not as fast as the LP4. So we can see that we're loading this 4K. Now, again, this is 4K, not 2K. So this is double the resolution, loading faster. Let's go ahead and switch over the machine. So once it's loaded, the machine is going to click. And what I've noticed is with higher resolution images, more detailed images, the one thing to keep in mind is the machine will beep, but it may not start going right away. It's almost like it's buffering. So don't worry if it doesn't immediately start shooting lasers after the beep. We'll definitely give it a few seconds here, and what we should see is at some point it kicks off and starts engraving the image. And there we go. All right, we are done. Uh, Took a while. Definitely took a while. Um, but again, we're trying to do some photorealism, wood burning here, so it needs to take its time. Uh, you maybe can tell, but it's actually a little bit smoky in here. Um, so perfect opportunity to say, make sure you're doing this work in a well ventilated area. I forgot to turn my fan on, my vent fan on, and it's clearing up now, but it smells like autumn with leaves burning in here, which is probably not ideal since it's my basement. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's go take a look at what we got here. We're going to go ahead and lift the canopy up. Let's see. Oh, then I just knock into the camera. Okay, nice. All right, now remember we were on 50% power. Let me go ahead and switch. It's got that nice wood, fresh burnt wood smell. All right, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look. There you go, folks. Now, if I was going to do this again, I'd probably dial down the power in the darkest areas, here and kind of around the edges. I mean, it is. I mean, you feel that there's a surface to it, right? It's removed quite a bit, and here I mean, it's literally just almost probably at least half the way through the material. So I didn't get quite the same level. But that being said, right, just getting an idea, again, let's kind of compare that to our original image. Go ahead and blow that up just a little bit. So we have our original image, and then we have the ornament there. And it looks like, yep, the orientation is correct. So by rotating it, I got that orientation that I wanted. Okay. All right, so the piece that I want to set up now is the rotation device. So there's a few things we need to do to make that happen. The first one is we need to add this riser. We need to basically lift the entire unit up. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew the unit from the base. Okay. We're just going to I'm going to take the cover off because it doesn't sit with the cover. And then we're going to install the base, which really just extends it out. I'll turn this a little bit so you can kind of see. It's going to extend the whole thing out a few inches and up a few inches. So we tighten that first. And then I'm going to take the main unit and I'm going to screw that on. We can see now that it's much higher off the ground. We can put the base back on. So you can see right now it's not even all the way up. Let's go ahead and raise it to its utmost position. I'm going to go ahead and adjust this camera a little bit. There we go. And now you can see the distance has increased significantly. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to actually remove the base plate that has my template on it. And move that off to the side. Now here is where things got interesting for me because the product that I was looking to do is a 20-ounce tumbler. This is one of the ones that I've done. Not particularly big, kind of a standard size. And I really want to, I haven't done it yet, but I want to work on things like a Yeti or a Stanley, one of the big like 30 and 40-ounce cups. But I figured these were inexpensive and would give me plenty of opportunity to experiment without, if something went wrong, I wouldn't be crying over a $45 mug. But what I noticed was, if we just take a quick look here, we set the unit up following the instructions for the wiring, because it has to be wired in a very particular way, but those instructions were included in the manual. And they give you this spacer, and that's meant to go underneath the unit on this end. When that's underneath there, between the unit and the base plate, it's now level, okay? Which sounds great, except if I take my cup and I put it on there, it looks like it fits, right? We got plenty of clearance. However, as this turns, the weight is going to cause it to slip and fall, which is why we have this device here, which is adjustable with some rollers that allow you to rest that underneath the other end. Now, here's where I ran into a dilemma, is that, first of all, this can attach to the base plate, but if it does, and in its lowest position, I'm going to go ahead and bring it all the way down, it's still way too high. I mean, look at that. It's like an inch too high over the material. So this, if this was resting on it, if I lift this up and had it resting on it, it's not level. And this should be level, not at an angle upward. Okay. So I took foam out of the container, and what I ultimately did is I raised the entire unit up. So I started in the back, and I raised the unit up, and that's the main unit. I want to get that higher, okay? And then the next part was to kind of fill in the space between it. It's some more of these foam blocks. I'm using these rubber and foam blocks because I don't want it to slip, right? I want it to be as level as possible. So now that I've got, I'll angle the camera here because I'll give you maybe a better idea. But I had to put so these blocks are in here to hold this whole thing level but raise it up. And by doing that, it allowed me to bring the rotation piece around Now I got to lift it up. It's funny that it doesn't work in the lowest position. I don't know if I'm missing something, but it just felt very odd to me. But I'm going to go ahead and lower that there, and then that's not quite flat, but we're going to get it to rest in there. So the next thing we want to do is make sure, and I'll remove the safety lid for just a second because I think it'll give you a better idea here. So there's a couple things we want to check here. Remember those alignment lasers? Well, that's them right there. Now I'm not looking for them to be aligned yet, but what I am looking is they should be centered. So I want to slide the entire rig until those lines are in my centermost part. So we're going to get that lined up like so. I'm going to stand above it. I'm also going to try to make sure that it is perpendicular to the laser head. So we have our item here. We're lining up our laser to center. We want to make it perpendicular. Lastly, I want to make sure that it's level this way, that when the item I'm using is resting and it's on the rollers, which I got to slide those over, resting between those two rollers, that this is level as well. And the kit included a small level that you can place on there. In this case, I have a level here. I can check my bubble. So we're level and we're centered. Now, the one thing I didn't demonstrate before is this just has like a little chuck that you can tighten and loosen, and there's different sets of teeth that you can attach. I have the long, what I call the long teeth on. If I take the item out, you can see the long teeth there. And basically you turn the chuck, which is going to open the teeth, place your item. Before I forget, you want to go with top facing left. In other words, the top of the cup to the left. Put it in there. Tighten up that chuck until it's tight all the way around. Make sure it's sitting in those rollers. And you can check to make sure that it turns freely. All right, we've done all that. Now, in theory, the alignment and everything is good to go. We want to make sure that we can put our top back on. We got to still have that clearance, that coverage. We can see that our laser lines are almost aligned. Now, the one thing that we didn't do here that we're going to have to adjust is the laser area, right? We can see that this whole area is outside of the laser area zone. So now that we have that lined up, we see that our laser area is going to be able to cover from near the top to near the bottom, which is more than adequate for what we're looking to do. All right, let's pull that back. Now, this item I put in here was already done, so I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to teach you what I've learned. Somebody else, I learned this from watching other videos. What they would do is they would take kind of your painter's tape and wrap it all the way around the thing. And that way you can do a test print or a test engrave that's just on the surface and see the quality and the output before you actually engrave the final product. That's great. That works fine. What I have found works just as well is paper or really thin cardboard. So what we're going to do is we have our blank, call it our slug, if you will. I'm going to remove the lid. We don't want anything that's going to get in the way of the rollers or the teeth that are going to hold it in position. And then all I'm going to do, as I walk away for just a second, is I got a little piece of this cardboard cardstock, right? All right, so we got this cardstock. Got lucky, it's the exact height of the item. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of tape. Don't need much. And I'm going to tape one edge like so. And then just wrap it around. Don't care if it overlaps. That's not what I'm concerned right now. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to cover the entire surface. Another piece of tape. Kind of along the spine or the edge where they meet. And I've just wrapped my cup in cardboard. Now, focusing on which part is the top, We will go and put this in the machine. Again, place it here. Open up those teeth a little bit. All right, and now what I have is the ability to, as we're going through this tutorial, where I can test print before I do a final print. All right, so looks like everything's set up, lined up. Bring the top down just a little bit. And here is another thing that I want to make sure you're double checking is you want to make sure that you have clearance. Right here, look, my teeth are going to come and knock right into that thing. That's going to throw off my alignment. So I have a couple choices. I can either, in this case, I'm just going to slide the whole rig back just a little bit so I know that she has freedom to move. All right, the other thing I'm going to do real quick is just gently turn it and make sure that the front is staying between the two wheels. It's not trying to move or play, that we have some stability. And lastly, just double check to make sure I have a nice 45-degree perpendicular centered setup. That's going to give me the best possible outcome, hopefully, that I'm looking for. All right, so let's get back to the software. We still have the LP4. We can get rid of our other images. We're going to zoom out so you can get we still see that we have the area workspace that's been defined. So now what we're going to do in the top right corner is we're going to go in, hit those settings, go down to mode settings, and we're going to click on rotary extension mode. That is what we've just attached, the rotary extension. We heard a beep saying that it confirmed. We can go ahead and close this, and you'll see that it changed our work area pretty significantly. All right, so we've got our machine lined up. Everything's looking good. What's next? Well, just like before, we're going to want to create a template, right? An area of boundaries to work in that matches our material or our product so that we get the best possible result without risking overlap, over the edge, etc. So we're going to need a few different measurements for this. The first one, if you have your calipers or if you have a tape measure, you want to measure either the diameter, the longest distance, cutting that circle, in this case, in half, or the circumference, the distance all the way around. Since I have my caliper, I can measure the diameter, and it is 75 millimeters. And what I'm going to do is go into the software, and over here by device information, where we click that setting to add the rotation piece, we're going to go ahead and scroll down. If you don't see it, you got to scroll, and you can see here it asks for the diameter and the perimeter. You only need one. It'll automatically figure out the other for you. So we're going to set our diameter at 75. All right. Now we want to create our box, right? Our boundaries. And we do that by taking a different measurement, and that measurement is the height of the item, right? We don't want anything going above and beyond the edges of our tumbler in this case, which is 20 centimeters. So we're going to go ahead and set our height at 200. You can see that up here. We're going to make sure we're not bound, we're not locked, and we're going to set our width to the perimeter. What is the total perimeter distance? That's 235. I'm not going to worry about the 0.261, 235, and we are left with our bounding box. Now, right now we can see that the bounding box is telling us we are above and beyond the printable area for our item. And that is ultimately because just because the item is 20 centimeters, just because it's a certain size doesn't mean that that's the full printable area. Remember, this is defining our printable area. So one of the ways we can check this is to kind of close our bounds, bring them within the scope here, and then we can go ahead and click preview. And it's telling me that we're still outside the engraving. I got to be just inside the red lines. Let's try that again. All right, we get our preview. Let's go take a look at the machines. All right, we can see that our machine is telling us that's our width. Now what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to actually turn this gently, because now I can line it up with the line in my paper, right, with the tape line, and we can check by clicking. Let me show you where this is. Over here, If we hit continue, that should rotate the item. So let's see how far around. Let's go back to the machine. I'm going to set this up right here. We want to see, I'm going to hit continue right now. See, it turns. And we see it didn't go all the way around. It stopped a little bit shy. So we're going to quit our preview. We're going to go back to our project. We're going to go ahead and expand that bounding box. And I think what I ultimately did is I confused my height and my width. I bet you if I went with 235, in this case, its height in the program, I bet you if I go with the 236, rounding up, leave the width where it is because that's saying it can only go 155 centimeters wide. So if we think about it that way, I confused them. There's the distance here, which I measured at 200, but that's not that goes beyond the printable area. I believe if I've done this correctly, and I center this box, let's try to get it nice and centered. Oop. All right, that should be it. Now, again, let's take a look and see what happens when we do our preview. All right, our laser line still shows that the printing area. Let's go hit continue. Let's see, does it make a full rotation? Precisely perfect rotation, edge to edge. We have now created, go ahead and quit our preview. We have now created our template. This is our workspace based on the size of our item. And you have to imagine that this is turned sideways. Our item is like this, right? So don't confuse it just because you got this big red line thinking it's vertical. Our print space is actually horizontal, right? This being the top, the bottom, and the left and the right side wrapping all the way around. And this point here would, at a full rotation, would be touching this point here. So what's next? Well, we have our perimeter. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this ever so slightly. I want it away from my center line now because when I start doing my test print, I don't want it going right over the tape. I want to be able to see it on the paper. So let's go ahead and import an image. We're going to go to the left side, grab an image. Now, we could grab an image. We could do the cat again. But keep in mind, that might actually look a lot better on paper than it's going to look on the aluminum. Aluminum is going to be it's going to be removing parts of the surface, right? And the finer details are going to be harder. There's not so much of that, how the degree of burning or the removal of material. It's really kind of a bit all or nothing. Now, I've done some experimenting, and if you look at our Facebook page, you can see some of the stuff that we've done where we actually have done some dithering and been able to get some texture on stuff. But for today's purposes, we're going to go with a fairly straightforward image. We're going to go with something that is clear or transparent. And I don't want to go too large just for the sake of time. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's grab this Decepticon symbol. All right, so we have our Decepticon symbol. But remember, our cup isn't this way. It's this way. So we want to rotate this 45 degrees, nice and straight. If you remember, if you saw the earlier part of the video, for whatever reason, every time I do this, if I don't click the image and rasterize it, it will not show up and actually print in the rotated position. Now, what this means here, if we kind of do our rough measurements, is that this is going to cover 50%. It's going to wrap around 50%, and then 50% will be blank. That's that blank area here. If we wanted to, we could go all the way to the edge. We could go all the way to this edge. You don't want to go over the edge because then it's going to bleed and start burning over itself. But in this case, if you want a nice, large, centered image, it's going to be almost the full height of the cup. And make sure that your bounding box does not go beyond the red lines. If you do, you're going to get an error. But you can get it larger. You can get it all the way up there. So for today, just for the sake of speed, we're actually going to make it a lot smaller. We're going to go ahead and center it, put it right there, and that's our size. Again, we can do a preview and get a sense for Let me go ahead and quit that preview. I want to turn off my rectangle because I don't want it showing me the preview of the rectangle. So we're turning off our boundary box, clicking on our image, hit preview, and now we can see instead of showing us the full length, it's showing us just how wide the item we've selected is going to be. So that's your height from the bottom to the top of the cup. All right, we have our image. Now let's quit our preview. Now remember, I actually am trying to print the preview on this product before I laser etch to the actual surface. So I don't want to use the settings I would use for the aluminum surface. We have recycled paper. We do not need to go high resolution for this. We're just getting a sense. It's paper, so we're going to use 450, the blue laser. Now here we definitely need to dial down this power. 50% is going to cut right through that paper. So we're going to drop this down to maybe 20%. And we're only going to go with a depth of 2. So we just really want to see what it would look like, make sure everything turns out, the proportions are good, etc. So now that we've done all that, we have our one image, everything else is hidden. We can go ahead and click laser engraving. All right, should be done in just a second. All right, it's done. The rotation is complete. We're going to just slide that off, and there you go. Right on the surface of the paper, right? Gives us an idea. Is it straight? Is it aligned correctly? How does it look? And then, of course, all we would have to do is remove the paper from the sleeve, replace the object, and then we would just change the settings. Let's take a quick look at that now. So now that we have, we'll call it good confidence, we've done our test print. All it cost us was a little piece of paper or cardboard. We can click that image again, and now we can set the proper settings for what we want to do on the materials. Now, the thing that I've learned is that you can leave it on recycled paper, you can change it. The truth is, it doesn't matter what your default is that you pick here, cowhide as an example. Doesn't really matter. What matters is the power. In most cases, I'll go 100. I will go with a depth maybe of 3. I don't need it to go much deeper into the material. Resolution, if it was just this bitmap type image that we're using, or this clip art type image, 1000 should be more than sufficient. Again, we only did it in 1000, and you can see right there, we have nice clean straight lines. Everything came out good. And this is where maybe, and again, I think the use of the construction paper or cardboard is excellent because, try different things, dial it in, dial it down. Ultimately, if you find something that works, like if 1000, 1K works, use it. It's going to save you a ton of time. You don't need to use 2K if you don't have to. All right. Now with that, you have the fundamentals for using the device and using different objects, including the accessory for the rotation. And what I can tell you is that probably one of the best things you can do is just experiment a bit, right? You can look at some of the key settings or some of the settings that I've used today, practice. But ultimately, you have the opportunity. Here's one that was done with an alien. Now, in this case, I used a slightly higher setting. I really wanted to get through to that silver underlay, right? The aluminum underlay. Here's another one. I think I mentioned this earlier. I was working on some dithering. So you can see this one, I tried to control how much surface I removed, which gave me a little bit, almost not quite a grayscale, but we can see that there's a little more detail, finer detail going on that I was able to capture. I'm particularly happy with the way that turned out, considering a lot of times when you go and do something like that, you have one that turns out like so, where I used different settings, and ultimately I got more of just the silver shine through. I'm still pretty happy with this. I think ultimately it came out pretty solid, but you can see there's not nearly as much detail. Snake Eyes looks more like just bit of a nameless ninja, but all of this using this software. Nothing was done. This one was just multiple images. It did each one at a time. Let's see, what else do we have? Here's another one. And actually, I'm going to show this one off because I think this is a good example of, first of all, don't assume that the results on one color material is going to be the same on every color material. A good example is we saw the G.I. Joe I did earlier on this red. I used a slightly higher laser setting. You can see the silver really comes through. Same thing on black. Didn't get quite as much removal. I still get a lot of that black. So in this case, either because of the thickness of the outer layer or the fact that I might have been using a slightly lesser laser depth setting, it's not so much that it turned out bad. It looks fine as far as it's got more of that emboss, and you can actually feel how it cut into the surface. It just didn't go. If I wanted it to be that real shiny silver, I would have had to dial this in a little bit more. Ultimately, you're going to have to experiment because just like anything else, I have two different tumblers that are ultimately the same size but not the same brand. And in one, I really get kind of this almost darker underlay. And in this one, it cuts right through to the silver, which came out really good. Here's the LP2. And this right here is just the laser module for the LX. So let's talk a little bit. There's two flavors of the LX. There's the LX1 and the LX1 Max. This is the regular LX, which, as I mentioned before, is already going in at 23 inches and 22 inches, so a nice large work area. The other distinction is the laser modules are not built into the base unit. This base unit is able to move in two different directions. It can move front and back and out, right? So you can have the full range of motion for larger work areas. The same rotation module for the LP4 is available or works with the LX1 and the LX1 Max. So bear that in mind too. If you have one of these, you can actually use it with either of the models. They are the same. One thing that took me forever to figure out, I could not get this to work. Worked immediately on the LP1, could not get it to work on the Max, and that's when finally I came across that while there are multiple inputs, and on the LP4 you use a combination of one USB and one USB-C, for the Max it must be USB-A male to the back of the rotation unit to another USB-A onto the main unit, and all the connections are on the side here. If you try USB-C or any other combination, it will not work. Finally, when I realized that this cable that came with it, I tried that, immediately picked it up, worked like a champ. That was after thinking I had a defective unit because it wouldn't work. And again, it's different than the hookup on the LP4. So don't assume that because USB-C works with the LP4 that it can work with the LX1. Don't ask me why. Hopefully they address that in a future firmware update. The other big distinction is the laser modules are not built into the unit. So you have a few different options. There are actually two of the 450 nanometer lasers, the blue lasers. There's both a 10 watt and a 20 watt option. The nice thing about the laser modules is that they fit universally, so there's no changing out the housing or anything else. They have a safety screen cover. They have the ability to do depth measurement, so a little tab that goes out the bottom there, so you know you have enough clearance between your laser mount and your product. And lastly, one thing that I like that they've done with all their units is they've made all of these things magnetic, so they just pop on and off pretty easily if you need to make adjustments. So this right here is a 10 watt blue laser, and they have the optional red laser. So this is going to be a 2 watt 164 nanometer. So the key is that the LP4 basically has these two built in. They both work. You can't use them at the exact same time, but the LP4 has both a red and a blue laser, which is really convenient in one unit. In this case, you have two different laser heads. It also takes a drawing head, so it can do like fine drawing. It's basically a pen or a stencil that connects to this. I don't use it for that, so I don't have that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to place our laser head into the unit. It slides in. It has a stopper, so it can't actually can't fall out the bottom. Tighten that down. We will follow there's a great video actually from LaserPecker on all of the various hookups. So we'll follow our hookups, plug in our power, and turn our power on. So it has a power button on the side. It also has an indicator light on the top, which is a little bit harder to see. I'm going to just go ahead and give this a quick pivot. So we got an indicator light here, which is flashing blue. All of their units are both computer and Bluetooth. And sometimes that happens, and I just accidentally unplugged it. All right, so just like before, we've connected everything up, connected to the computer, and we're back in the LaserPecker Design Space software. We're going to go ahead and hit connect the device. Again, that COM5. And what we should see is that it is now picking up our LX1, and we can see that our workspace area has grown significantly. Now, fundamentally, everything that I've walked you through so far applies, right? As far as setting sizes, perimeters, we can already see that it's pre-detected the 10-watt, 450 nanometer laser, so it knows the blue laser is installed. Even though it's asking for a diameter and perimeter, we're going to go to settings. Just make sure that we're not using rotary extension mode, so let's go ahead and shut that off. We can see that we don't need that. And let's go ahead and bring up, so we can see the machine is in the base mode. In fact, what I'll show you is when we went to rotary, let me just do that real quick. It actually moves, and similar to how we had to line everything up perpendicular, you would follow the same process here. You'd plug in your rotary extension, you would line it up perpendicular to the laser head, make sure it's nice and straight before you move forward. But other than that, it's, again, the same mechanism for measurement, for the diameter, circumference, etc. All of that really applies. You're just using a different laser to do it with a larger work area. That's the one probably advantage here, is that if I had a larger tumbler or a longer tumbler, I could use this to get a wider area, work area. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say we're not using a rotary. It will retract back to its original position. We have our large work area, and this really, fundamentally right here should be considered your top corner. So that's going to match up with kind of the dock right where the laser head is. So if we move this Decepticon symbol, the easiest way to kind of test that theory is we're going to move it here, and that should be right there in that top corner. So let's go ahead, and we can go ahead and hit preview. Let's go ahead and bring up the machine. And we can see now that what the machine is basically doing is it is drawing a square, right? So we have a nice red laser line that's being created, creating a perimeter. We can see the actual blue laser sample light. Let me see if I can get a slightly better angle on that. Now, that could be tough, folks. Hold on. Not sure how well you can see that, but we have that nice perimeter area that it's giving us. And similarly, this is just giving us the perimeter of this particular object. We could just as easily use one of our rectangles like we had before. Go back here. We're going to go ahead and we'll create we'll call it another bounding box. I'm just going to pick a random size. We're going to let's go that big. Let me put my product inside of it. That way, when it does the preview, it's going to draw the outermost quadrant or section. Even though there's something inside of it, it's going to go from here to here. and I know that anything within that space will fit. So let's go ahead and hit our preview again. All right, we can see the general space, and here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another piece of that cardstock. You cannot do better than this beautiful cardboard cardstock. And we're going to go ahead and just lay that there. And as long as our line, our red crosshairs, doesn't go beyond the edge, we know that that is a safe zone. In fact, we have plenty of room. All right. Now, the one challenge I'm going to have here is that right now, the unit is on these elevated legs, if you can see those here. I put elevated legs because I was using it with a rotation device. So similar to the LP series, I had to raise the whole unit up so that I could get that extra distance. So ultimately what that means is that this should be much higher. This should be closer. The laser only goes so low. It has a safety. The laser has a safety so that it won't fall all the way through. And I'm way too far. The distance here is considerable. So, all right, so I'm going to take some cardboard, get it to roughly the same height as my risers. I'm going to move that, and you can see now, I mean, that laser is just basically almost touching, right? It's right there at the surface, which is about where it should be. So I'm going to unscrew this. I'm going to use the measurement here on the bottom, tighten up my laser, flip that little nub back up, and now I know that I am at the prime distance that I should be. Okay, so we have our safety area, we know our print area, we know our print object. Let's go ahead and do a quick print. So first things first, just like before, what laser settings do we want to use? Well, really we're carrying, first of all, let's get rid of our bounding box. We're not going to print that. We can go ahead and print, we'll use the same Decepticon symbol. We have several different options here. First, we can look at resolution. The default resolution for this is 1K. We have our power settings, we have our depth settings, we have our number of passes, and we have a level of accelerator, which we're not going to go into further into the detail in this video. So ultimately, we can click our preview again, see that we're within our safety zone. Go ahead and click next steps, and hit confirm. Again, it's going to transfer the image, and then we should see our print head start to move. Now, one thing you might notice is this is a very different approach than the LP series. The LP uses a laser and then focuses that laser, that same beam, without physically moving the laser head, right? So it's basically using a mirror prism lens to move that laser into different areas. Whereas this, much like a dot matrix printer, is moving on two axes. It's moving on an X and Y axes, and you can see it's actually moving back and forth. So it's drawing it actually by physically moving, as opposed to just shining the laser and using the reflection to change where it goes. I may have those terminologies wrong. Sorry, science majors, if you know better. But the key here is that it's not as fast. It's extremely versatile. Working on large objects, it's great for cutting objects, larger objects, or cutting out many objects at the same time. But as far as speed-wise, this is only at 1K. Remember, we did most of the stuff in 4K on the LP. This is at 1K, and already we can see that it's we're only about a quarter of the way through of this fairly small symbol. In fact, let's go ahead and just stop. Let's go ahead and stop. So it ran there for, let's say, about 2 minutes while I was jibba-jabbing. And let's go here and let's take a look. Well, interestingly enough, apparently I had my settings way too low. If you can see that slightly lighter area below my finger, that is the area we were doing. Clearly, I either missed a step or Don't have my settings quite dialed in, but that was not powerful enough. Um, but ultimately, the same approach, the same mechanism is going to apply for this. It's just able to do a much larger area, and because of that, the biggest maybe feedback I would give, especially as I did some larger things, is test, test, test. It's like the whole measure twice, cut once. So much easier to figure out if something's not dialed in, like I just did. Realize no, something's wrong with my settings, and you don't want to find out that an image is in the wrong place or that it didn't quite translate the way you wanted to, especially if you're working with complex items. I've seen people use this to carve like on the back of a guitar and etch stuff in. You don't want to get that wrong because these cups, anywhere from $7 to $8. Everyone that goes wrong is $7 to $8 out the door. Ultimately, hope you have a wonderful experience with your laser etching. Always remember to be safe, be careful, and enjoy yourself. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel where we have this and other videos related to toy making, 3D printing, 3D scanning, and all the other fun stuff. And we're just novices. I just decided one day that this looks really interesting and started picking up. Basically, COVID hit, I was really bored, and I decided I can play around and experiment with some of these new cool toys, and I've been having a wonderful time since, but just learning as I go and learning from others. So hopefully this video has been beneficial to you. I'm Dave Floss with Prometheus Falling Toys. I thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.